is also known as Dr. Graveyard. And I see you have your scrubs on. I guess you've been very active in the area and doing things for the cemetery systems. And, I'll turn the podium over to you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I love seeing everyone here because to me this is such an important subject. And the organization that they were talking about, the Texas chapter of the Association of Gravestone Studies, y'all really should join. They're wonderful, wonderful, especially if you love cemeteries. But back in 2009, I really became interested in historic cemeteries where African Americans are concerned. And what I want to ask y'all, do y'all think this is a grave? Do you think it's trash? Do you think it's cultural treasure? What would you think? If you came into a cemetery,
I think, burial.
Those are bricks, broken bricks, so it might have been like the disturbance of
It
like
was
marked
perfect.
grave.
no, that's a very good observation. This was a creek that floods, and it is compulsive. Later on, I'm going to tell you all about Gullah Geechee, that culture. But it's compulsive that in African American cemeteries, they are buried next to some type of water source. And this one unfortunately floods, and when it did, it moved everything around. But this is definitely a grave. It is wonderful cultural treasure. Each item that is placed on this grave was placed there because of a loved one, as well as the person that actually buried this person, that has symbolism. And y'all bear with me. But it's really, to me, the most beautiful type of grave. Let me ask y'all something. Have y'all ever been to cemeteries that y'all have seen a lot of broken pottery? And you have, which one, here in Texas, or was it in another?
Yes, very four corners of Holland, Grayson, and Bannerman County. Four corners.
All right.
So Confederate, actually.
But that's it. Even though it may be an African American cemetery, on the Anglo-European cemeteries, they use the same traditions. And I'll explain that in a minute. But this is to me, another beautiful exhibit. And this person was truly loved. But when broken glass is left on a grave, it is a Bakongo of Central Africa as well as an open voodoo of Angola tradition. And why they would do this, their loved one they would bury, but everything that loved one touched before they passed away, whether it was the plate they ate off of, or the glass they drank out of, their medicine bottles, they were all brought to the grave, and the grave, it was glass, and they were broken over the grave. And the reason why the spirit was being released, but also it would stop the death in that family. The cycle of death would be stopped. But another thing is, this was also called grave glass. This right here, these items, that is all grave glass. And that was used also, that was sprinkled on top of the graves as well as around the graves. And the reason why, they didn't want their loved one to wander. So many of these traditions came about because of the Gullah Geechee culture, which is off the Sea Islands of North. Have you heard of the Gullah Geechee off of North and South Carolina, the Georgia and the Northern Florida? You have also. And these are the African traditions that we're going to see today. And what happened when Africans were enslaved and brought here in the 18th century? There on the Sea Islands, the Anglo-Europeans were starting up rice plantations. And what they needed the most and paid for the most were those Africans that were enslaved that knew about farming or rice farming as well as irrigation, tide irrigation farming also. So what they would do is their value to be bought would be in today's money, $12,000 to $24,000 for that farmer, for that African farmer who had been there for generations in West Africa and had, it was 2,000 to 3,000 years of knowledge that these Africans that came over and were enslaved acknowledged. But there was another, I'll tell you later, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but I'm kind of wanting y'all to know that there was there is, and still is, thank heavens, the Gullah Geechee culture. But have y'all ever been to cemeteries to where, I'm going to show a little bit more of glass. This we found at the St. Mary's Cemetery, African American, 1860. And you'll notice that was part of the daisy and button pattern of glassware. Here is the one that's the star glass. And this again. And this was after the new owner plowed up the oldest part of the cemetery, which I'm going to show you pictures. It was horrible. This is their assortment of gray glass. And this was called pink willow. And then this was a salt shaker. Here is more of the gray glass. So when y'all see these items, that's why I was so excited that they allowed me to speak today. We have the best volunteers in the world here in Texas. But people all of a sudden, when they get to a cemetery, let's clean it up, let's clean it up. No. I believe in what the Texas Historical Commission has just preached forever. Don't turn a stone, don't cut a blade of grass, nothing, don't touch anything until it is everything is documented, both with pictures and with surveys, measurements. I even use my GPS on my phone to place where the burials are. And if you even suspect there's an unmarked grave, go ahead and mark it on your map before you start cleaning up. Because later on I'm going to tell you about 2 landscapes in African American cemeteries that are not like the Anglo-European cemeteries. We had 2 wonderful archaeologists. Miss Elmarine Bell here at the St. Mary's Cemetery. I adore her. She is a precious friend of mine. And she couldn't be here today. She was just elected to the town council in Italy, Texas. And so I'm so thrilled about that happening. But because the landowner continued to build on top, whether it was a fence, a road, over anomalies or graves, because we had and then also he plowed it up and then planted corn. And the whole time the African American families are begging him, stop. We all were begging him. And so that's something I hope will change. That is blue willow, China. That was a piece that was found out here. Normally, that was a Pond's cold cream. And you will see that a lot on women's graves will be the Pond's cold cream. And in a way, it's another way that you can find out if it's an unmarked or undescribed grave, that if it's male or female, because you look at the items, on there. Here's some more. This was a beautiful, the bottom of a vase that the archaeologist found that. He was so cute. I got so excited. I think salt pottery. Now, have y'all been to cemeteries to where you see seashells? Okay. This one, the Dallas African American Museum in Dallas, is unbelievable. They have the most wonderful mock-up of the 1869 Freedman Cemetery and what was found there. And this is one of their exhibits. And if you'll see, there are seashells, they look like oyster shells, and there are plates that are broken. White was very big. Today I'm not going to tell the story about that because it takes too long. But the thing about seashells, they use them not only for decoration. The Yoruba of Nigeria, they were very big on grave decoration in Africa. And they used it for decoration, but they always also believed that the seashell encompasses the loved one's soul. And then depending on what type of shells were used on the graves, such as the clam shell, that meant a journey. And with the Gullah Geechee people, they had everything goes back to heaven. Everything goes back to the afterlife, the long journey, getting back to their homeland of Africa. And so the clamshell means journey and sea because of the old saying that come from the Gullah-Geechee, that the sea may have brought us to America to be sold and live a horrible life, but the sea in the afterlife will also take us back to our homeland of Africa. And then if it's a conch shell, that was used to show the male and female reproduction organs, but it also tells if that's a female that's buried there or a male that's buried there. And on the conch shells, if the shell is thick, then that's a male. On the females, it's thin, and that's female. It's very fragile. Then the oyster shell was the most popular one. It was the most abundant also. But they would bleach them white, and because it grew a pearl, it meant that it was prosperity and good luck. But it also served a good purpose in that if you line on the graves, which you'll see that so much in Anglo-European cemeteries, German as well as Christian, which German are Christian, but you will see that also. They did that on purpose because then no grass would grow on the grave. And the reason why this was done, when I was talking about landscapes, there are two types of landscapes in African American cemeteries that y'all probably have even seen in both African American and Anglo. And that is, in that graveyard, the grave will be scraped clean of grass because they do not want livestock, which back then the livestock would wander, not have fencing. And so they would keep the livestock from defecating or urinating on the graves. And then next, prairie fires or wildfires. That was also. And then the third thing, snakes, which were the devils. I can understand what they're talking about on that. But to me, and then here the clam shells and their oyster shells on this Alabama one. Here's the conch shell. And then here is in Comfort, Texas. Have you ever been to Comfort and looked at the cemetery? They're beautiful. Oh, they're so beautiful. And they, even though it's an Anglo-European, and the reason why that happens, you'll see so many of the African-American traditions in the Anglo-European is because back in the days of plantation and slave owners, it was the African-American people that took care of the cemeteries, both African-American cemeteries and Anglo. So their traditions were brought in with the traditions of Christian. But they're also getting back to why these cemeteries, because here's medicine bottles, and here's some of the items that were found in the plowed up part of St. Mary's Cemetery. The Africans, the enslaved Africans that came, they had a belief that the slave owner may own us in life, but they will not own us in death. So their burial spot was secret, and it was handed down by oral history. And the funerals that usually be at night, there'd be at least 15 people that would be carrying torches, that men, to the grave. And that's when everyone would come out and they would go to bury their loved one. Usually it was on a piece of ground that the plantation owner didn't want. It was worthless. But the reason why they used items like this, these are burial markers. And I'm going to tell you about the medicine bottles. And they did this on purpose because the plantation owner, the slave owner, he would look at this and say, well, it's just a bunch of trash. But to the Africans that were enslaved, no, it's cultural treasure. It's what it is. And so another thing, medicine bottles or jars. Have y'all ever noticed that when y'all go to cemeteries? Where did you see those at?
Ross
I'm going to give them some of these. These are the pictures. So, I can tell you. But the reason why is that they would also bring these medicine bottles to the cemetery. And it is a Bakongo also, this is a Bakongo tradition. And they would take the medicine bottles, they would invert them in an oval around the grave. And what they were hoping is that the medicine would absorb into the ground, thus making their loved one well in the afterlife. And it also was a protective oval. And especially the chiefs, the Congo chiefs, would use this a lot on their graves. It's called a Lumumba, Lumumba. And it's like it keeps evil spirits away. It seems like the journey back to Africa, sea and evil spirits. And y'all will also notice these items are repetitive. When you go from one cemetery to another cemetery, you will see these repetitive items, which to me makes it even more glorious that it's that way. But in 2009, and here is, like that was a 1906 milk of magnesia bottle, and this was all plowed up, you know, before the corn. And several of us were out there, normally never touch any of this, never, never. But we talked to an archaeologist, and because it was in danger, and we were, so many of the families wanted us to get these items, we did. We had to pick them up, and it was really kind of scary a little bit because the new owner, you have to be kind of careful sometimes. The new owner did not want, he was wanting to sell it, and with the cemetery, and developing. And this is happening in Houston and in Austin right now. And it's really sad. Now here's the Bakongo Lumumba that is that. And notice the plates. And he probably has candles, they're lights. It's to light their loved one's way to heaven, is what it is. It's what that does. But back in 2009, I was working with the Mesquite, Texas chapter of the NAACP. And there was this was bluing balls. We have a lot of those. They love that tonic bottle. And I think it's because of the color that they decorated the graves, just like on the bottle trees. They love the amber blue was used so much, and that you'll see. And oh, here's some more of the broken tonic bottles that were here. Now, on the liquor bottles, you'll see liquor bottles, but they're vintage, they're old, they're not the new ones. The Gullah gets you believe that all you have to do is just leave an empty bottle, that the fumes, you don't need a full bottle of liquor. The fumes will be just enough to keep them happy. So you would see this a lot, is what you'd see. Also, this Hylex bleach bottom, you would see that on the graves there at St. Mary. And there's another tonic bottle. This is the Brickyard Cemetery. And do y'all remember Dr. Terry Jordan? I love that man. Oh gosh, that was a loss, I'll tell you. And his book, Texas Graveyards, is one of the best books in the whole Bible. Well, back in the 80s, I started reading his book and went to all his workshops, loved the man. But he really was the first that I really started talking about these traditions. But he didn't, I don't think he mentioned the Gullah Geechee as yet, but the others that he did. And so they wanted me to do research on here to see if, this was in 2009, to see if there was any comparison to Gullah Geechee or anything like that, because I was really talking about it a lot back then. And it turned out that I found this article in the, I'm going to read it to you, not read it, but I mean the title. It was in the Dallas Daily Times Herald, August 24th, 1889. And the title was, "A Negro Custom Putting Playthings and Medicine Bottles on the Graves of Children." Well, I got so excited because I started reading it, and this reporter was a voyeur who was watching. There was a baby that was being married, and the families were out there. And he said he was watching, and the mother was carrying a basket full of toys and items. And so I meant to put that article on here, and I didn't do it. And this is all that's left. We did thank heavens for Charlie Orr with Historic Mesquite. She got an archaeologist out here, and they found at least 80 bodies. Mm-hmm. So we've identified 40. But anyway, I get a little sidetracked also, just bear with me. But basically what he was doing, he noticed, he said, well, I started looking around. And over here were all these toys and rattle boxes, tin horses, Noah's Ark toys, toys they only could play with on Sundays. And there were baby bottles that he said children's books everywhere. You could even see the pages turning in the wind. And then he noticed medicine bottles. And on one grave, there was at least 8 medicine bottles on one grave. Is it my time yet?
Oh, no, you're good.
Oh,
Go.
Because y'all just tell me what to do. Because when I start talking about cemeteries, I can't shut me in. But anyway, that's when I read this article, I thought, I got to do some more investigation where this is concerned. So that's what I've started doing. And it is true that all these items, any item does have symbolic meaning. And they're to be left there, not touched, but definitely documented. We've got to stop these developers from coming in and tearing up these cemeteries, and especially African American cemeteries.
So there's no protection on these cemeteries?
There is. Very few laws, but there are. But the state of Texas will not enforce them.
So that's
I mean,
the
we
rub.
were on a letter writing campaign, everything, to, there was a man named Patrick, he was the DA, because the first thing you have to do is go to your local law enforcement, and then it has to go through all the, rings.
So it has to be an established cemetery to be,
Even then, it's not protected.
Well,
Well,
a single grave is considered a cemetery.
That's
It
true.
is technically by law afforded all of the same protections that a larger, more established, more visible cemetery would. Deborah's right. The first step is you do have to go to your local law enforcement. And we have a long way to go in educating local law enforcement
Just like when they-
about their responsibilities.
no, you are so correct. Just like when they changed the laws, was it 2009? They did not beef them up
They did not.
at all. They just kind of changed some words around. And they don't realize, I love what the Texas Historical Commission says, these are archaeological sites. These are some of the last of archaeological sites. And the artifact, which is that burial marker or that tombstone, that should still be there for generations to study and to see. And it's not. I can't tell you the number of government people I talk to, and they're not interested at all. It's sad, I tell you. Except there are a couple that are. But the majority, no. But, let's see. All right, on these, back to the Gullah Geechee and the Sea Islands. The names of the groups that they paid, the plantation owners paid a lot of money for. And it's just because these groups are so interesting that are from Africa. It's the Bakongo of Central Africa, the Mende and Creole of Sierra Leone, the Ovenbundu of Angola, the Nagwas and Ashanti of Ghana, the Igbo and Yoruba of Nigeria, and the Bantu of Central Africa. Well, what happened from about 1850, or no, not 1850, it was earlier than that because it was 18th century. From 18th century until the Civil War, when these enslaved Africans were brought to the Sea Islands for these rice plantations, they all had different languages. So I find this like an anthropologist's dream, and that because they were isolated, they didn't build the bridge from the mainland to the Sea Islands until the 1920s. So the enslaved Africans that came there, they were isolated, but it isolated all of their culture and their blended culture.
and their language. They still have their
That's
language.
it, the Gullah language. Thank you, exactly. Because that's what I was getting to. Even their language is, and what they did, they took words from every tribe, African tribe. They took the Native American words, and then they took some Anglo-European. But the language also protected them because the plantation owner didn't know what they were saying. And you know what's curious? I grew up in Mesquite, Texas, on a farm. And When I was a child, we were 4, 5, and 6. I think there were 5 of us, but the 3 older ones. Mama took us all to the doctor. She didn't think anything about it. And he wanted to know, what language are they speaking? I can't understand one thing these children are saying. Well, the reason why, we were speaking Goa. But I didn't know that until I was actually started studying this. And then all of a sudden, I was listening. There's a wonderful young woman that is the elected chiefess of the Goa Island, Gullah-Geechee Island. Her name is Queen Quint, but her real name is Marguerite Woodbine. And when you listen to her speak, oh, I can't keep up with her, but if she goes very slowly, she will, it's like him, own instead of his, ax instead of ask, any of these words. But because my father was in livestock, but then my uncle was in cotton, there were several workers that lived on both, not on our farm, but on my uncle's farm. They were the only children we played with, were the African-American children when I was growing up, until we went to public school. So apparently I wish that my mother was still alive, because I'd love to ask her if that's what it was, you know. But I have a feeling it is, because even now when I listen to it, there's a lot of it, I know what they're saying. I can still hear, I can't speak it, but I understand what they're saying. But, let's see, y'all, excuse me. Let me go on here. What is so wonderful? The enslaved Africans, a lot of them escaped to Florida, and they intermarried with the Creek Indians. They became the Seminole, which I love. If you've read anything, they were our Buffalo Soldiers. They were our Indian Scouts. And in Bracketville, Texas, every September, I want to go this September, they have a wonderful parade, and they all celebrate the Seminole Indians there in their cemetery. And it's wonderful. It's supposed to be. It's great. But these young men and their families, they first moved to Mexico. Then they moved to Texas. And then there's a pocket that was in Oklahoma also of the Seminole Indians. So we're very thankful that these young men and even older men, were made it here to Texas. And they brought their burial traditions with them. Because that was another thing I was thinking, well, why do they do these things? And it turns out that, yes, the Seminole, because they were part Gullah, they bring their traditions with them. And also, as they were not as isolated on the sea islands, and they started coming through the south, they would spread these traditions. And also, unfortunately, when the enslaved Africans were saved to other mainland plantations, those still type of traditions would be shared. Now, this was the oldest part, the part that the new owner bulldozed. This was one of the two. I explained the first one, but the second one is of how to find, or the landscape. That's what I'm getting to. A lot of times people come up on African-American cemeteries and they go, oh, this is horrible. They don't even keep up with this cemetery at all. This is just dreadful. We got to get here and clean out this place. No, it was done on purpose. And the reason why is, going back to, I want to keep my grave secret. I want to keep my grave from the living. And so it will be overgrown, especially if there are not any more burials. They want to leave it overgrown to where that plantation owner, slave owner, can no longer find them, and that they continue to be free in the afterlife, is what they want. But this was the original part of the St. Mary's Cemetery, the old film that was taken. And you can see, all of this is the old part. The newer part they would keep up. All that is, and there were all these artifacts that we have found. They were all back there. Can you imagine coming up on that and discovering that untouched of museum quality artifacts and traditions, how wonderful that would have been to do. Now, when I got involved, a friend of mine asked me one time back in 2012, why are you so concerned about these cemeteries? They're protected, nothing's gonna happen to them. And I said, oh, really? Well, let me show you something. So we got on the computer, and the first cemetery that I pulled up was the Secondary Cemetery, and how the families had just come on in March of 2012 to start their yearly mowing, cleaning, decoration day. Well, when they showed up, here it is. It was all, he had built a new road, there's a baby buried right there. All this was, they just didn't even know what to do. It was the saddest thing. All the artifacts are there. And they just carried that off to the dump or burned it. Don't know what they did. And even the landowners, it did go to court, but it was a hung jury, unfortunately. But for 3 men, they just felt like that, as their attorney said at the very beginning, shouldn't you be able to do what you want to do with your own land that you own? Well, you don't own the cemetery. Yeah. And so, anyway, that 3 of the men would not give in. And it went for 5 days to where, and so I'm hoping that again, one day, they can still go back and do something about it. Or if we can all do something about it. The more and more information we get about these cemeteries, that's what's important. But here are just some of the items. And you'll see, here is one of the old medicine bottles right there. And what is amazing, which I'll show at the end. Now, we came up one day, and we'd already seen all that. This is all plowed under. This whole part, past this truck, I don't want to put some of mine out. Let me see.
I don't think it was.
You
Wanted to zoom it out?
No, I just want that pointer. Is
Oh, the top. At the
That's
top.
very, very top.
Well, there's a little button above those 2
I'm so
arrows.
afraid to. Well, that's okay. Right in here was a creek with bodies buried on either side. He filled it in. Then, the cemetery, the old part, was all about as far back, almost to that truck right there. And when I was telling about dangerous, I had 5 people out there, all women. And normally my photographer, she always brings her gun. That day she didn't. Because I didn't think anything, about it until my great niece was with me. And there were these men not working, just watching us, is all they were doing. And even the landowner got in one of his airplanes and was riding around to see what we were doing. And I said, I think it's time to leave. And so we stayed until after lunch. It's when we came back to lunch that we really noticed it. And these men followed us all the way out to the highway. I took video of it. And I'm like, now this is ridiculous, to be that dramatic.
So I have a question about deed records. So like this new owner bought this land. So is the cemetery part of what he bought? Does he own that?
No, he does not
So
own it.
there is a deed that
Well, really, there are 4 cemeteries there. One is Anglo, and then there are 2 are Anglo, 2 are African American.
But they're deeded.
He thought he was making it look better for them. He was trying to help out the families. Exactly. Because he said, look, he even wanted, this man was so unreal, he even wanted, let me see, well, I don't have it. There is one woman's grave over here, and she was from South Carolina. And the thing is about these graves right here, even these that are tombstones made out of stone and concrete, they were born enslaved, but they died free in this cemetery, which to me makes it even more wonderful. But he wanted it moved over closer, just the tombstone. You can leave the body. Now this is what he admitted in court. You can leave the body, but move that tombstone over so it looks nicer. Because you've got all the stones in a group. That's when you just want to. And so, now, I always put up a baseline, and I hate to even put anything in the ground, but I needed a baseline to show I had maybe 200 flags. Didn't even touch it. Because It's way back here, all back here. I can't tell you the thousands of artifacts. They just glisten in the sun is what they do. Well, then, he started planting corn. And that's Miss Ellie. I adore her. Elmarine Bell. She's precious. That's her family right there. And there's the corn, and it's all graves. But it was wonderful because, like, when they got the archaeologists, they were at least able to find the anomalies, the graves of people. And they can identify them because of the families. Like one woman, her mother died in childbirth. And when you look out in here and see all that brick, she said that brick was the curbing around my mother's grave. And she died in childbirth having this woman who's now in her late 70s. And so, and then the baby, I'll start crying on that one. It's just so sad. It's just dreadful. Now, here is a sample of the this is a Christian Anglo-European cemetery. But the Lawrence family, for generations, they keep their graves scraped. And that is an African-American tradition. So you're going to notice that of how, let's see. Now, I always found this interesting. Let me get back over here, Rick, because I want to make sure that y'all get it. And y'all just tweak me when it's time. Just say, ding, ding, get the book out, whatever. You know, but this is a farm of a salmon pout. Now, a salmon pout is the Ashanti people tradition, and they called them thicket of ghosts, is what it was called in their cemeteries. And what it is, it would be stick enclosures around graves. It was compulsive for all Africans. And the reason why I say Africans is that the enslaved Africans, these are their traditions that they brought here by the different tribes that came. And this is a salmon pout, is what it's called. Well, it's still a form of their family members that are buried here. And then, but it was compulsive that you don't have the neat little rows like you do in the Anglo-European. It's here and yonder that the family has to be together, or otherwise their loved one will wander that cemetery for the rest of their life and never be able to go back to their homeland of Africa, is what they would do.